Underneath Seoul's skyline, where mirrored glass towers scraped the belly of heaven, Kang Eunha walked with trembling fingers wrapped tightly around her worn resume folder. The afternoon sunlight glinted off the logos of corporations she once dreamed of joining, names printed in gold, carved into steel, haunting her like ghosts. She had graduated with the highest honors from Daehan National University. Her thesis had been praised by professors who called her a mind fit for policymaking. She was fluent in four languages, had perfect aptitude scores, and could recite economic formulas like poetry. But none of that had mattered. The last 6 months had crushed her. 57 interviews, zero offers. Not because she wasn't brilliant, because she wasn't connected, because she didn't smile the right way. Because, in her words, success is built on merit, and in theirs, who do you know? Her stomach growled as she passed a convenience store. She ignored it. Then, like a cruel joke from the universe, her old flip phone rang. The number was unknown. She almost let it ring out, but something in her chest, maybe that leftover fragment of hope that hadn't fully died, made her answer. Miss Kang Yunha. Yes? This is LX Corporation. You're scheduled for a 2 p.m. evaluation with our executive office, level 49, Dimyong Tower. Don't be late. Before she could respond, the line cut off. She stood frozen in the middle of the street. Lux, the largest tech conglomerate in Korea? The same company whose CEO, Aries G, was infamous for building a billion-dollar empire before 30. She hadn't even applied there. No letter, no resume, no cover email. Just summoned. She checked the time. 1:13 p.m. she ran. By 1:57 p.m., she stood inside the mirrored elevator of Dimyong Tower, panting, hair disheveled, wearing a plain cream blouse and ankle-length black skirt, her interview outfit from last week. She smelled like subway sweat and old perfume. Her shoes were scuffed. She was the only one in the lobby without designer heels or a tailored blazer. A woman in red looked her up and down and smirked. Wrong building, intern, she hissed before stepping into a different elevator. Yunha straightened her back and refused to flinch. The doors opened on level 49. Silence. Unlike the chaos of lower floors, this level was carved in black marble and navy glass. Not a soul was visible. Just a single hallway stretching toward a titanium door. Her footsteps echoed with every step, her nerves screaming louder than her thoughts. As she reached the end, the door clicked. It opened on its own. Inside was a modern throne room. Cold, minimal, eerily quiet, a desk of obsidian. And behind it, a man with charcoal gray hair and a gaze like sharpened obsidian. Ariz G. The man who once turned down a $1 trillion government contract with a single line, "I don't make weapons for fools." He didn't look up from his screen. "You're late," he said. Yunha blinked. The call came only. Excuses are oxygen to incompetence. She swallowed hard. Then I'll be brief. I didn't apply here, but I showed up. That should count for something. Finally, he looked up. His eyes were devoid of warmth. His suit was flawless. A black-on-black ensemble with silver cufflinks and a gaze sharp enough to slice through armor. "Sit," she did. Her back straightened instinctively. "Tell me," he said, folding his hands, "why should I trust a nobody from nowhere to sit outside my office?" She didn't answer right away. Her voice had failed her in past interviews. This time, she didn't use it to beg. Instead, she met his gaze and said, "Because I learn fast. Because I don't gossip. Because I don't break under pressure. Everyone says that. I don't say it. I live it." He raised an eyebrow. "I've spent 6 months being rejected by people less intelligent than me. I can handle arrogance. I can handle absurd expectations. And I can certainly handle someone who thinks belittling others makes him powerful." Silence. She realized she'd crossed a line, but instead of firing her on the spot, Aries let out a sound she didn't expect, a small, almost imperceptible laugh. "Very well," he said. "Let's test your threshold." He pressed a button on his desk. Within 30 seconds, a young woman in heels entered, holding 2 coffee cups and a stack of files. Aries nodded toward her. You're replacing Miss Choi. Effective immediately. The woman blinked. I what? Aries didn't even look at her. Pack your things. The girl's face turned red, then pale. She stormed out without a word. Yunha blinked. Wait, I'm hired? You'll be my secretary. But let me be clear, he said, leaning forward. You'll get no training, no guidance. You'll be expected to anticipate my needs before I say them. If you fail once, you're gone. I don't hire projects. I collect tools. Yunha's fists tightened. Then I hope I'm the sharpest one you've got. Aries stared at her. For a moment, the air between them crackled. Not with magic, but with tension, older than spells. Your desk is outside. Start by organizing the Sangyeon acquisition files. If they're out of order by even a day, you'll be out the door by morning. She stood. Understood. As she exited the office, her legs trembled. The hall outside was now buzzing with whispered gossip. People eyed her like she was a ghost. No one knew her name, but they would, because Yunha hadn't come this far just to fetch coffee. She came to win, even if she had no idea yet what kind of game she'd just entered. The moment Yunha stepped onto the 49th floor as an official employee, the air felt different, colder, thicker, as if something unseen weighed on the atmosphere, making every breath slower, heavier, like she'd passed through an invisible threshold where ordinary rules no longer applied. The walls gleamed with polished obsidian. The silence hummed like static. Her desk sat directly outside the office of Aries G, the youngest tech billionaire in Korea and the man she now worked for. If worked was even the right word for what this felt like. Her screen had no instructions. Her onboarding file? Blank. No one greeted her. No orientation, no team. Just her, a sleek terminal with encrypted access codes, and a schedule filled with acronyms she didn't understand. And him. Every so often, the double doors to Aries' office would slide open with a hiss, revealing his figure framed in the low, silvery glow of interior lighting. He wouldn't speak. He wouldn't even look at her. A folder would land on her desk, or a voice would issue a single command from a speaker built into her monitor. Code the investor transcript. In Mandarin, restructure the Sangyeon contract by clause category. Eliminate redundancies. Coffee. Black. Gusibsa dosi. He didn't say please. He didn't ask if she understood. He expected perfection. When she got the formatting slightly wrong in the investor memo, placing the chairman's name 1 space too low, he didn't yell. He simply walked out, dropped the paper in front of her, and said without looking, if I wanted mediocrity, I'd have hired a marketing grad. He disappeared again. Her cheeks burned, not because of the words. She'd faced worse, but because she had made a mistake, and it felt like falling off the tightrope she didn't even realize she was walking. By lunchtime, her hands were trembling. The inbox was overflowing with documents, tagged Aries eyes only. Everything was encrypted, watermarked, obfuscated in corporate code and legal jargon so dense it felt like deciphering spells in an ancient grimoire. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't even gone to the bathroom. But she didn't break. She couldn't afford to. As she typed, the door hissed open again. This time, he didn't step out. He simply stood at the threshold and stared. Aries G, immaculate, monolithic, expression unreadable. Her fingers paused on the keyboard. What? She said, not even bothering to hide her exhaustion. Did I do this time? He didn't respond, just tilted his head slightly. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in confusion. You remember the 2023 merger timeline I glanced at 3 days ago? She blinked. The one with the flawed clause about offshore equity shielding? His brow lifted. Just slightly. You corrected it without access to the file, he said. Did you memorize it? No, she said plainly. I reconstructed it. Pause. How? She shrugged. Photographic sequencing. It's a mental trick. You anchor patterns by rhythm and symmetry, then extrapolate the visual gaps like filling in a puzzle. He said nothing, but his silence was louder now. Her heartbeat quickened. He stepped closer just a few paces. The air shifted again. You're not an ordinary hire, he said finally. She scoffed under her breath. Neither are you. Their eyes met. For the first time, it felt like something clicked, like two tectonic plates grinding against one another at the exact right fault line. Not attraction, not affection. Something colder, sharper. Two storms recognizing each other. He turned away. Don't get comfortable, he said. This office eats smart people for breakfast. I'm not here to be digested, she muttered. He paused. And, was that the edge of a smirk? The door sealed behind him. That night, Junha stayed later than everyone. The lights dimmed automatically at 9 p.m., but she didn't leave. Not yet. Something about the office gnawed at her. Not just the brutal schedule or the sharp-tongued CEO. No, something beneath it all felt wrong. There were 3 biometric scanners for the executive door, retinal, voice, and one she couldn't identify, coded in swirling characters not found in any human language. She'd seen it when the doors opened, just for a second. A glyph like molten silver flickered in the dark frame, and the moment her eyes locked on it, it pulsed. She froze. That wasn't tech. That wasn't AI. That was something else. Behind the walls of LX Corp, something ancient was humming. She shut off her terminal and stood. For now, she had no idea what she'd walked into, but one thing was certain. She had memorized everything. Every schedule, every name, every odd code and inconsistent timestamp. Her brain was a living archive, and she was already building a map. One that didn't just lead to corporate secrets. It led somewhere much deeper. And Ari's G, for all his cold ruthlessness, might not be the most dangerous thing in this building. He might be the one trying to keep the doors locked. It began with numbers. Yunha was reorganizing archived transaction logs from a decade ago, an assignment Ares had tossed on her desk with no context, no deadline, no purpose. The files were encrypted beyond industry standards, buried in a sublayer of LuxCorp's internal server called DarkReg 0, a label that wasn't even listed in the company's system map. But she noticed something strange, the timestamps. Each log had an extra set of digits, 7 characters long, spaced out irregularly. At first she thought it was a glitch, but then she saw the pattern. They weren't timestamps. They were equations, hidden inside file names, disguised as dates. Every entry followed a sequence derived from Euler's identity, a mathematical formula so obscure, so esoteric, that only someone who'd spent a lifetime buried in textbooks would notice it. She whispered the numbers under her breath. 3.1415, 9, 2.71828. To the power of IPi plus 1 equals 0. A convergence point. And the moment she keyed in the full sequence into the terminal out of sheer instinct, the entire archive room went dark. The lights cut off. The door, behind her, locked with a hiss. Then the wall, to her left, solid black steel, shuddered and split, revealing a narrow elevator shaft she hadn't seen before. No label, no buttons, just a glowing panel with a symbol, etched in something that shimmered like living mercury. Ares's voice echoed in her head from days ago. If you fail once, you're gone. But this wasn't failure. This was discovery. She stepped inside. The elevator moved soundlessly, downward. Far below the main tower, it passed the visible floors, past the mechanical basement, past everything, until even her breath felt compressed by the weight of the earth above her. When it stopped, the doors opened to silence. A long, cold corridor lit by an unnatural blue hue, the air humming with electricity. No, not electricity. Something older. Something waiting. At the end of the hall stood a vault door unlike anything in the modern world. It was massive, rounded like a gear, covered in concentric rings, etched with unfamiliar script. And in the center was a single pedestal. On it lay a relic. It looked like a book, or maybe a tablet, bound in metal with seams of light crawling across its surface, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. She felt something the moment she stepped near it. Not a presence, an awareness. It noticed her. Her fingers hovered above it, trembling. Why was this here? Why would a tech company hide something like this? And why? Why did it feel like it had been waiting for her? The moment her skin brushed the edge of the relic, it responded, with light. A surge of energy burst from it, wrapping around her wrist like a shackle of silver fire. Her vision blurred. Symbols danced behind her eyes. Ancient, mathematical, magical. Memories that weren't hers whispered in her mind, and then, as if the entire world caught its breath. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice was cold enough to freeze flame. She turned. Ari's G stood at the edge of the vault, flanked by two silent figures in black suits. No expression, no anger, just his gaze, piercing, calculating, deadly. Yunha's mouth opened, but no words came. He stepped forward, the sound of his shoes echoing in the impossible silence. "You accessed Dark Reg," he said. "No one has access to Dark Reg." "I didn't mean to," she started. "Yet you solved a cipher no one's cracked in 10 years. "It wasn't a cipher," she replied, her voice finding strength. "It was Euler's ghost code. You layered it into a date sequence. But the key was the golden ratio overlay. It aligned with—" "Stop," he said sharply. "She did." He stared at the relic, now glowing brighter, still tethered to her wrist. "I've hired magicians, cryptographers, AI models. No one could activate it. And you," his eyes narrowed, "a secretary with a degree in economic linguistics, just happens to wake it up?" She met his gaze. "I don't know what it is, but I know it didn't reject me." A long silence passed. He walked past her, inspecting the relic up close. The patterns shifted at his approach, but didn't respond the way they had to her. "They call it the Archive Flame," he murmured. "Found it under Gyeongju years ago, buried beneath layers of dragon bone and quartzite. It doesn't run on electricity. It doesn't obey gravity. It shouldn't exist. Then why hide it in your company?" He looked at her. "Because this company isn't what the world thinks it is." The relic pulsed again, brighter now, as if confirming his words. She felt a warmth travel up her arm, spreading through her veins like knowledge and fire combined. She could see glimpses of symbols arranging themselves in her mind, entire systems rewriting the way she perceived reality. "What is it doing to me?" she whispered. "Bonding," Ares said. "It's choosing a host." She staggered. "That wasn't the plan. I didn't—" "There was never a plan," he cut in. "Only probability. You've just shifted it." He stared at her again. "Longer this time. You're not just a secretary." She laughed bitterly. "You hired me to fetch coffee." "I hired you because I couldn't read you." He turned his back to her. "I should erase your memory, bury this level, burn your name from the employee log. But you won't." He didn't respond. She pressed, softer now. "Because you've spent years trying to unlock this relic, and it chose me." He looked over his shoulder and smiled, just barely. "That," he said, "is the most inconvenient truth of all." The elevator hissed open behind them. "We'll discuss the implications later," he said. "What now?" she asked. "Now?" Aries G walked past her, eyes sharp with something dangerous. "Now you learn why this company needs more than engineers." The vault sealed shut, but something had been opened, and neither of them could put it back. The pain wasn't physical, not at first. It was something deeper, something older. When the relic pulsed and its silver flame licked across Yunha's skin, it wasn't fire that burned. It was memory, ancient, foreign, impossible memory, flooding into the folds of her mind, rewriting her thoughts with symbols she'd never seen but somehow understood. She collapsed to her knees in the vault chamber, hand still fused to the archive flame as the codex took root. Somewhere between her lungs and her spine, A second heartbeat began to thrum. A glowing interface appeared before her eyes. Not on a screen, not in the air, but inside her vision. A lattice of symbols folded across itself, spiraling like galaxies into a single glowing phrase. Shadow Flame Codex. Soul Sync. 97% complete. Her breath hitched. The codex was alive, not sentient in the way humans were, but aware, selective, bound not by data, but destiny. She coughed as a final spark surged through her veins, leaving glowing tendrils of silver crawling up her arm. Like sacred tattoos, pulsing faintly before fading beneath her skin, the relic dimmed. Its task was complete. Yunhwa staggered upright, panting, her body trembling from the imprint. The vault was still, silent, watching, and Ari's G stood a few paces away, unmoving. She looked up at him through bleary eyes. What is this? Ares didn't answer at first. His jaw clenched, hands buried in his coat pockets, eyes locked on her like he was staring at something long dead come back to life. You shouldn't exist, he muttered. That's not really comforting right now, she snapped, still breathless. His expression didn't change. The Codex hasn't chosen a host in over a century. So what does that make me? A mistake, he said quietly. Or a warning. She stumbled toward the nearest wall for support, the aftershock still ringing in her bones. What the hell is going on, Ares? He let out a slow, cold breath. You want the truth? She nodded, unblinking. LuxCorp is a shell, he said. On the surface, we're a techo empire. Biometrics, AI security, neural cloud systems. But behind the patents, behind the money, there's a syndicate. We're one of 7 guardians that protect Korea's magical core. The ley line nexus beneath the peninsula. What you call tech, we call containment. Her heart skipped. Magical core? Ares nodded. A convergence point of energy, older than any god your textbooks ever mentioned. It leaks into the world, gifting power to bloodlines, creating monsters, corrupting the balance. That power is why we exist, to monitor, to contain, to bury what can't be destroyed. She stared at him, numb. And this codex, it's part of that? It's the oldest known artifact in our registry, a binding contract between the original guardians and the flame that sleeps beneath the ley line. It was sealed after the Great Dissolution, when the guardian factions turned on each other. For centuries, it stayed silent. Until me. His gaze sharpened. Yes, until you. She looked down at her hands. The trembling had stopped, but something deeper had taken its place, a hum beneath her skin, like her blood had learned a new song. And you think I'm, what? A threat? I think, he said carefully, you're a deviation. One I didn't account for. Yunha swallowed the rising panic. Why me? Ares shook his head. We've had seers, prophets, systems analysts try to predict the Codex's reawakening. Some said it would respond to bloodlines. Others said to karma. You're a statistical impossibility. A random girl with no known lineage, no magical registry, no background. But I unlocked it. You didn't unlock it, he corrected. It chose you. Silence fell between them. And then the Codex flared again. Not as light, as voice. A whisper threaded directly into her mind. Initiating legacy protocol user. Authentication confirmed. Welcome, Yunha Kang. Shadow Flame Bearer. She gasped. It knows my name. Of course it does, Ares muttered, his voice colder now. It's bound to you. But I didn't ask for this. Neither did I, he snapped. But here we are. Yunha's breath shook. What happens now? Ares looked at her with a mix of resentment and awe. Now you get thrown into a war older than this city. One you can't walk away from. He turned and began walking back toward the elevator. She stood frozen, the Codex interface still flickering inside her mind. Data columns, soul resonance ratios, ability tiers she couldn't interpret. In one corner of her vision, a faint flame pulsed, a reminder that something ancient was now watching through her eyes. She followed him silently, stepping back into the lift. The doors closed behind them. "What happens if I fail?" she asked, not looking at him. Aries didn't hesitate. The ley line ruptures, soul collapses, and the dead things that sleep beneath our feet wake up. She stared ahead, hands clenched at her sides. "Great," she muttered. No pressure. The elevator climbed, and behind her eyes, the codex whispered again. First ability unlock. Archive burn. Awaiting catalyst. Something had started, and Yunha was no longer just a secretary. At 6:15 a.m. sharp, Yunha's alarm rang. By 6:16, she was on her feet, hair tied back, uniform pressed, hands shaking. Not from nerves, but from something stranger. Something deeper. Every morning, since the relic had branded her blood felt warmer, her reflexes faster, and her eyes sharper. The lights of soul no longer just glowed through the windows. They shimmered with faint sigils, unseen by ordinary people. Like the world had always been painted in hidden ink, and now someone had given her the fire to read it. Still, she was just a secretary. On paper. At 7 a.m., she filed Aries G's schedule. By 8 a.m., she reviewed encrypted reports, flagged M-class activity. By 8:42, she was in his private office, standing across from him as he reviewed a fresh document with lines of soul code embedded in invisible ink. Her normal duties remained the same: translate, edit, coordinate. But now, beneath that normalcy, was an entirely new layer of reality, of training. He never raised his voice, never praised her. But he watched her like a man testing the edge of a newly forged blade. "You're 3 seconds faster than yesterday," Aries muttered, eyes still on the file. "That's all?" she replied, sarcasm dry. "Guess I'll cancel my parade." "Celebrate after your soul stops, leaking heat signatures when you're nervous." Yunha scowled. "You said that would stabilize after the loyalty bond." He looked up, and for once something like amusement sparked in his gaze. "Only if you mean the bond." "I agreed to it, didn't I?" "You signed a magical contract," he said, pushing a file toward her. "Not the same as loyalty." The Shadowflame Codex had unlocked a menu inside her mind, 6 rings orbiting a central flame. Each ring represented a contract: knowledge, skill, energy, memory, will, loyalty. She could bind to people, places, even systems, and leech from them, but only if the bond was accepted by both sides. The loyalty bond to Aries was her first. It hadn't fully locked yet, because some part of her still didn't trust him. "Why does it matter?" she asked, sitting across from him now. "I'm learning. I'm faster. I'm trying." "Because if the bond remains unstable, it can be reversed, and reversed contracts burn." She froze. He closed the file. "So unless you're fond of third-degree soul scarring, I'd recommend choosing your allegiances soon." Outside the glass walls of Aries' office, LuxCorp buzzed with the illusion of normalcy. Analysts moved through meetings, engineers ran diagnostics, drones scanned delivery corridors. But beneath it all, something darker stirred. Yunha noticed it first when the elevator stalled between floors on Tuesday. The lights didn't flicker, but her codex flared, and in the reflection of the glass panel beside her, she saw something standing behind her, tall, shapeless, eyes burning violet. A residual curse. She turned to strike, but it vanished. The elevator continued as if nothing had happened. Later that night, she asked Aries. He didn't even blink. "They're probing. Minor class incubi. Could have been worse." She narrowed her eyes. "What is this faction targeting us? They call themselves the Blind Moon. And what do they want?" "To dismantle the magical syndicate," he said. "To break the 7 pillars that hold the ley line seals. We're one of those pillars." "And me?" "You're a wild card." The next week passed in quiet warfare. Yunha's mornings began with soul compression drills, clamping down her aura until it vanished from detection grids. Her afternoons, contract alignment tests. She learned to push energy through palm sigils, redirect curses, and identify elemental breaks in coded language. Her evenings were hell, forced absorption cycles using the Codex's base rituals. Most days, she passed out by midnight, and every night the Shadow Flame Codex grew louder. It whispered stats, probabilities, warnings. Unstable affinity detected, emotional load, interference, 4.2%. Warning, dormant skill, trigger approaching threshold. External, entity presence, near network perimeter, class unknown. Then came Friday, the day the alarm didn't ring, because at 5:14 a.m., Yunha was already awake, sweating, heart pounding. She'd had a dream, or maybe a vision, the city burning, Lux Tower collapsing, Ares bleeding out in the snow, a woman with no eyes standing over him, chanting in a language older than God's. The codex flared the moment she opened her eyes. Host perception threshold, breached, initiating passive defense mode. At 7 a.m., her desk exploded. Not a bomb, a ripple, like a spell crashing through the fabric of space. It wasn't visible, not at first, but every window near her shattered simultaneously. Her coffee lifted midair, froze, then dropped. The screens blinked into static, and a shadow stood where no one had entered. A tall man in a suit. Except his tie was wrong. It hung upwards, defying gravity. His smile never touched his eyes, and his presence, it clawed at her soul. "Ah," he said, voice slick like oil. So the Codex did choose the girl. Yunha stood slowly, fists clenched. "Who are you?" "I'm the beginning of your trial," he grinned, snapping his fingers. The world twisted. She wasn't in the office anymore. She stood in a mirrored plane, endless warping. Her own reflection repeated 1,000 times around her, all of them moving out of sync. The intruder, no, the invader, stepped forward. "Let's see if the secretary bleeds like a mage." He raised his hand and launched a spear of black fire. Her body moved before she could think. The codex activated. Passive reaction triggered. Archive. Burn. V. 0.7 initiated flames erupted from her hand, silver and red. They collided with the spear midair, scattering embers across the mirrored floor. She screamed. Not from pain, from overload. Her circuits weren't ready. Her body wasn't ready, but her soul was. She launched herself forward, awkward but fast, flames wrapping her like a cloak. The man sneered and dodged, summoning chains of liquid darkness. She twisted midair, landing a half-formed kick to his chest. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't even effective, but it surprised him, and the codex responded. Adaptation logged. Combat instinct accelerated. Flame bias confirmed. She rose panting, blood dripping from her cheek. "Interesting," the man muttered, brushing off his coat. "You're clumsy, but..." His smirk faded. "You're waking up." Suddenly the mirror world shattered. Yunha blinked. She was back. The floor was scorched. Her desk gone. Ares stood in front of her, one hand holding a smoking shard of something crystalline, his personal barrier amulet. He didn't look angry. He looked furious, but not at her. "That was a Class B infiltrator," he growled. "And you survived." Yunha collapsed into his arms. "I fought back," she whispered. "I didn't mean to. You didn't die," he said. "That's what matters." The codex pulsed inside her mind. Quieter now. First combat engagement logged. Dormant core. Awakening, 12.6%. She looked up at Ares. "What am I becoming?" He held her tighter. The one thing this war wasn't ready for. The secretary of the hottest billionaire in Korea had just become his most dangerous weapon. The air smelled like scorched iron. It happened so fast that Yunha didn't process it as real until it was already over. One moment she was standing in Ares G's office, arms crossed, halfway through an argument about security protocols. The next, the window behind him exploded inward. Glass slicing the air. Shadow diving through smoke. And without hesitation, he moved. faster than any human should, faster than she could react. He threw up a shield with his left hand and hurled a spell with his right. Violet energy lit up the room like a lightning bolt crashing through the clouds. The figure, a masked assassin cloaked in distortion, crashed into the barrier Ori's cast, but the blowback struck harder than it should have. There was no sound, no scream, just the sickening shudder of reality itself distorting. Ares dropped to his knees. The assassin vanished in a crackle of disappearing magic. His target missed. Yunha screamed his name, lunging forward as he collapsed, fingers twitching, eyes glassing over. His body convulsed once, then stilled, but he wasn't dead. His chest rose, barely. His mana, however, it wasn't moving. It was frozen, trapped. The Shadow Flame Codex flared in her vision. Emergency. Link detected. Ares G, critical mana cascade failure. Warning, soul containment. Fading. Host core will collapse within 1 hour. No, 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 she whispered, holding his face in her hands. His skin was still warm, but the flicker in him was dimming, like the flame inside was caving in on itself. He was slipping beneath the surface of something deeper than unconsciousness, a magical coma, an internal collapse from overloaded arcane flow. And there was no mage, no healer, no tech in this city who could get through the layers of encryption locked around his body and soul, except one, her. The Codex offered a prompt. Initiate soul dive, risk level, severe, success chance, 18.7%. She stared at the glowing interface only she could see. What happens if I fail? Codex user may be lost in target's memory labyrinth permanently. She didn't hesitate. Do it. Everything shattered. Her body fell beside Ares's, limp, as her consciousness was pulled inward, into flame, into void, into a storm of memory, coated in pain and half-formed regret. The world reassembled in colors and echoes. She wasn't in an office anymore. She stood barefoot in a snow-covered courtyard, surrounded by burning sakura trees, the sky overhead warped and torn like a wound. This was his mind, his memory, his prison. She stepped forward. Every flake of snow that touched her burned. Every step she took forward whispered a name, not hers. A boy sat alone in the center of the courtyard, small, maybe 10 years old. Ragged clothes, thin frame, a chain of broken sigils etched along his back like someone had carved ancient contracts into his skin. Yunha's breath caught. Ares. He didn't turn. The moment felt stuck. Like time wasn't just looping, it was refusing to move. Another figure stepped into view from the opposite side. A man, familiar only in outline. Broad-shouldered, eyes as cold as Ares's, but crueler. This was a memory, but the energy was real. So real, it made her stomach twist. You failed the containment again, the man's voice echoed, distorted and dry. Your mind is still yours. That's the problem. The child Ares didn't reply. He simply knelt deeper into the snow, as the man raised a glowing brand in his hand and pressed it against the boy's neck. Yunha cried out, "Stop!" They didn't hear her, because they weren't really here, but she was. The Codex allowed her to walk this timeline, to trace the fragments, and now she understood. This wasn't a coma. This was a containment seal breaking from the inside. Ares had been built, not born for this life. Someone long ago had molded him into a vessel. And it was still killing him. She reached the boy and touched his shoulder. And the scene froze. The snow stopped falling. The flames paused mid-flicker. The child slowly looked up at her. And in his eyes, hollow, dark, ancient, she saw the echo of the man he'd become. He didn't speak, he didn't smile, but he raised a trembling hand and pressed it against her chest, and whispered one word, "Rin." The moment snapped like glass. She was yanked backward, through decades of pain, betrayal, ritual, ripped from his soul space like a diver running out of breath. Her eyes flew open, her body convulsed, and then his hand gripped hers. Ares gasped for air. choking on the first real breath he'd taken in hours. He stared at her, pupils dilated, power leaking from his body in unstable wisps of heat and shadow. You, he rasped. You dove into the codex. She nodded, tears clinging to her lashes. I saw everything, she whispered. The experiments, the isolation, the brands, the false oaths. I saw who made you. His jaw clenched. You called me Rin. Silence. His expression collapsed into something raw, vulnerable. I thought you were her, he admitted, eyes unfocused. My first bond. She died, sealing the flame gate. She had the same eyes, the same fire. I'm not her, Yunha whispered, squeezing his hand. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. The codex pulsed in both their minds. Loyalty bond, full synchronization achieved. Shadow Flame codex, host core stable, network link reinforced. She didn't know what that meant for the war, for the factions, for the world they'd both been unwillingly pulled into. But in that moment, on the cold floor of his ruined office, their hands locked in silence, one truth stood taller than all the chaos. They were no longer alone. The halls of LX Corp felt colder without Aries in them. The man who once filled the building with unspoken authority, who turned silence into presence, who controlled entire city networks with a glance, was gone. Not dead, not absent, just recovering. His monocore still too fragile, his soul still too loud with old wounds. He had left one message, encrypted and absolute. Until I return, Yunha speaks in my place. The board had not accepted that easily. They were 7 of them, known collectively as the Council of Directors. All high-ranking nobles of the magical syndicate hidden behind layers of mundane corporate wealth and perfectly manufactured smiles, each one with eyes that gleamed like razors behind gold-rimmed glasses and silk ties, each one doubting her existence. A secretary, a girl with no bloodline, no family seat, no magical record, and yet she stood at the head of the obsidian conference table, spine straight, expression unreadable, the Shadow Flame Codex humming just beneath her skin. She hadn't slept, not really. The Codex wouldn't let her. Ever since the soul dive into Oris's coma, the Codex had changed. It no longer waited for her to command it. It whispered. Subfunction unlocked. Cognitive compression index. Memory matrix. Mode available. Compress external data into memory cores. System notice. Archive. Burn. Spell formation at 94.6% completion, awaiting field trigger. Even now, as the council glared at her from across the long table, the Codex was mapping their faces, their emotions, their heartbeat fluctuations, and feeding it to her in bursts of intuition. Miss Kang, Director Huan said, a brittle smile on his face. With all due respect, LX Corp isn't a university research lab. Your intelligence is not in question. Your authority is. I understand, Yuna said, voice calm, but the Codex recognized my synchronization, and I am the only operative with active access to the Shadow Flame, which no one authorized, another man cut in. It didn't ask for authorization, she replied smoothly. It chose. Whispers swirled around the room. She tapped the file on the desk. While Ares is under medical preservation, external factions have begun targeting our southern research node. You all know what's there. A pause. Uncomfortable. The secondary ley line stabilizer, Director Seo said under his breath. Yunha nodded, which means this isn't just a political vacuum. It's a prelude. To what? An attempt to collapse the Soul Seal. And with Ares gone, you're next. Director Huan narrowed his eyes. And what would you suggest, Miss Kang? I've already reinforced the firewall runes and replaced the 2 corrupt internal cores feeding mana to our western shield. I did it before breakfast. Impossible, one woman said flatly. Those runes require quint-encoded permissions. Yunha looked at her. They do, and unfortunately, your signature was embedded in one of the corrupted roots. Would you like to explain that, Director Kim? Gasps. The woman stood. Are you accusing me? I'm not accusing. Yunha interrupted. I'm proving. She reached toward the file on the desk, her fingers lit with a dim silver glow. The codex surged. A circle of red and black glyphs formed beneath her palm. The air shimmered. Archive. Burn. Activating local field mode. Executing core extraction. The spell wasn't fire, not really. It looked like flame, silver at the edges, red at the center, but it was memory, condensed, sharpened, and turned into a scalpel. The codex wrapped around her hand like a burning glove. She slammed her palm onto the center of the table. A burst of energy flared outward, and a glowing sigil erupted from Director Kim's chest. Projected above the table, like a hologram stitched from truth itself. A memory fragment played, Kim in her private office, transmitting leyline frequency access codes to a shadowed figure via a forbidden soul link. The silence afterward was explosive. "No," Kim gasped, stepping back. "This is a fabrication." Yunha narrowed her eyes. "You're forgetting what the archive burn does." She turned to the room. "It doesn't destroy memory. It remembers for you." Kim bolted. Before anyone could move, 2 containment guards phased in and tackled her to the ground. Her screams were drowned by the codex's humming. Director Huan finally spoke. "What are you?" Yunha looked up, sweat glistening at her temple. "I'm his secretary," she said softly, "and apparently your last line of defense." The codex pulsed inside her again. Spell integration 100%. Archive burn, level 1. Active, skill trait acquired. Flame of oath. Able to rewrite minor loyalty contracts upon truth exposure. She felt it, not just in her mind but in her soul. The spell had finished bonding, and with it she could now do something no other syndicate member could. Erase the lies others hid behind, and rewrite the very foundation of trust. When the meeting adjourned, only Director Huan remained behind. He didn't speak for several seconds. Then, quietly, "He would have never let you into this world if he didn't think you could survive it." Yunha sighed. "Maybe, but now that I'm in it, I'm not just surviving." She glanced at the darkened skyline of Seoul beyond the window. "I'm setting it on fire," the codex whispered in approval. And from the shadows of that boardroom, the first real stirrings of rebellion began to take shape. Not from traitors, but from within the flame of truth itself. The invitation arrived carved into obsidian and sealed with molten wax, an ancient relic delivered by hand, not courier. Even without opening it, Yunha felt the weight of history pressing against her skin. The envelope hummed with dormant enchantments, the kind that only responded to bloodline resonance. But this one didn't reject her. It pulsed once, recognized her bond to the codex, and opened itself with a whisper of smoke. Inside, a single line. "The Crimson Court of the Lunar Rite. Summons House G. Attendance, mandatory. Date, the blood moon." She'd barely had time to process it when Ares handed her a black velvet box and said, "You're coming with me." She blinked. "To that gala?" "You're my registered second," he said calmly. "You activated Archive Burn. You hold the codex. Legally, you are now a representative of my house. I'm your secretary." He looked at her, expression unreadable. "And tonight, you're a weapon." The gala was held at Seocheon Manor, an ancient palace that floated between dimensions once a year during the blood moon. It shimmered into existence on the edge of the Han River, visible only to those who had bound themselves to the magical current flowing beneath Seoul. When Yunha arrived with Ares, dressed in obsidian silk threaded with soul-threaded embroidery, the entire crowd fell silent, because she wasn't just unknown, she was uninvited. Eyes followed her like daggers made of etiquette and prejudice. Who is she? No crest, no lineage. She's holding his arm. She dares wear his house sigil. She's the secretary. The mortal one? Ares didn't flinch. He walked forward with her on his arm like she belonged there. And in that moment, Yunha realized something terrifying. He wasn't protecting her. He was presenting her. The ballroom shimmered in shifting tones of gold and crimson, the floating chandeliers crafted from condensed mana orbs, the walls alive with shifting murals depicting Korea's mythic bloodlines. Every step echoed like prophecy. When the moon ascended, large, red, and low in the sky, the music stopped. A bell rang. The blood moon ceremony had begun. It wasn't a party. It was a reckoning. By ancient law, any house attending could challenge another for titles, artifacts, or blood rights. The duels weren't forbidden. They were expected. They were what held the elite in balance. And this year, for the first time in decades, House G was no longer unapproachable because Ares had changed the rules. He had bonded with a non-bloodline mage, a commoner, a secretary. It was scandal, an opportunity. The challenger came from the northern sect, a noble mage from the House of Yom. Lord Sejin, clad in silver armor, etched with frost runes, his voice laced with centuries of entitlement. I invoke right. By moonlight, he called out, stepping forward. House G has betrayed purity. I challenge Ares G for dominion over the Gwanak archives. The room gasped. That archive was a vault of magical grimoires, a secret library that only Ares could access due to a bloodline lock. Ares stepped forward, eyes calm, but Yunha saw it. He was still recovering, still fractured inside from the monocoma. His soul thread was stable, but only barely. A duel now would reopen the wound. She stepped forward. I will answer the challenge. The room froze. Sejin laughed. You are a secretary, a fake. She smiled coldly. I am codex bound, flame registered, and legally his second. You'll die. Yunha raised her hand. The archive, burn, flared to life, its flames curling up her arm like a silver serpent, its core glowing red-hot, pulsing with the codex's voice. Dual protocol engaged. Memory flame compression active. I've died once already, she said, when no one remembered my name. The arena formed instantly. A circle of blood-red light burned into the marble, the moon casting its full gaze onto the ring. Runes lined the boundary, older than the city itself. Sejin drew a spear of ice. Yunha summoned flame. Not fire, memory. Her first move was clumsy. He knocked it aside easily, the frost cracking the outer shell of her spell. But archive burn wasn't a brute force technique. It adapted. It learned. And so did she. Each block downloaded his style. Each missed strike layered data into her codex. Her eyes glowed faintly, each blink compressing an entire memory matrix. Then the codex spoke. Counterspell formed. Veil erasure. She whispered, "Burn the lie." The flame turned white. She struck. Not his body, but his past. The archive burn clawed into Sejin's memory core and exposed what he'd buried, his forbidden pact with a Shadow Court entity. The audience gasped as the memory projected into the air above them. Sejin kneeling before a masked being, offering a child's name in exchange for spellcasting rights. The light shattered. Sejin screamed. He collapsed to his knees, blood trailing from his ears, his soul core convulsing under the weight of exposed truth. Yunha stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard. I don't duel for power, she said, voice hoarse. I duel for reality. The tribunal ruled in her favor. House G retained the archives. Sejin was stripped of title. As the moon dimmed and the world began to right itself, Ares approached her. He didn't smile, but his voice held something new. Pride. You weren't supposed to win. I didn't, she said. The truth did. The codex whispered again. Second spell formation initiated. But Yunha wasn't listening. She was staring out at the elites who once mocked her, who now watched her in silence. The secretary had arrived, and she was rewriting their world. One memory at a time. The storm didn't begin with thunder. It started with silence. Too much silence. Inside the penthouse suite of Luke's Corp's central tower, Yunha sat alone in the executive data room, eyes flicking across transparent layers of intelligence files projected in midair. The lights above flickered slightly, barely noticeable to the average eye, but the codex whispered. Trace protocol activated. Unauthorized data drift detected. She narrowed her gaze. The drift wasn't external. It wasn't a hacker or a foreign faction. This leak wasn't trying to steal through brute force. It was using Ares' internal access key, a ghost wearing a familiar face. It had taken weeks to narrow the pattern. The first clue was a series of subtle errors in communication threads, words replaced with encoded glyphs that didn't match the encryption flow. Then came the phantom pings from inactive terminals. Most would have missed them, but Yunha didn't miss anything anymore. Her mind had become a living archive, and the codex was the perfect predator. She ran the memory rewind function on the central access logs. One name pulsed red. Ryu Minjae, Senior Advisor. Rank, Executive Class. Clearance, 7G, Flame Tier. Her hands trembled. Minjae had been with Ares longer than anyone. He was the man who handed Yunha her first file folder. The one who always made sure she had coffee on nights. Ares pushed her past exhaustion. He called her kid, and once gave her a key to the rooftop garden when she'd been too overwhelmed to breathe. He wasn't supposed to be a traitor, but the codex didn't lie. And the final memory fragment it extracted shattered whatever doubt she had left. A recorded whisper, a voice-mapped log. Minjae speaking softly in an empty data chamber. She has the codex, the girl from Jeju. Yes, I'm certain it's her. The daughter lived. Yunha's blood ran cold. Jeju, where her parents died, where the Blind Moon faction burned her childhood home and left nothing but ash and bone. She staggered back from the projection, chest heaving. The memory wasn't just information, it was confirmation. Minjae didn't just betray a LuxCorp, he betrayed her. The door behind her slid open. Ares entered, expression unreadable. He stopped the moment he saw the open log, the codex interface still glowing. Yunha didn't say anything. She just looked at him, and he knew. Ares walked past her, slow and deliberate. His coat trailed behind him like a shadow cloaked in authority. He stared at the data projection for 5 full seconds. Then he spoke in a tone so quiet it could have killed a man. Where is he? Executive balcony, she whispered. The air in the room changed. The pressure dropped. The monodensity around Ares warped like a storm forming in human skin. He vanished in a blink. Yunha followed. Outside, the night wrapped soul in crimson haze. The blood moon had faded, but its echo still lingered in the air. Minjae stood alone by the glass railing, hands folded behind him, as if nothing had changed. Ares appeared behind him. Minjae didn't flinch. I assume you found it, he said calmly. Ares didn't speak. Then you know, Minjae continued, why I had no choice. Yunha stepped forward. You knew who I was, all this time. I had to be sure, he replied, turning slightly to meet her eyes. I needed to confirm if you were really her daughter. The girl they failed to erase. If I told Ares, he wouldn't have let you come close to the codex. He would have locked it away. Just like the others. You sold my family's location, she said. You gave their names to the Blind Moon. Minjae looked genuinely pained. I didn't know they would kill them. I thought it was just a retrieval order. You were never supposed to survive. Ares' eyes darkened. He raised a hand, silver runes swirling around his palm. Minjae didn't resist. I betrayed you, he said to Ares. I deserve whatever comes. Yunha stepped between them. Ares didn't lower his hand. Move. No. You think I won't go through you? No, she said softly. I think you can, but you won't. Ares' hands trembled, because betrayal was a language he knew too well. And this one hurt in a place deeper than war. Yunha closed her eyes. The codex responded. Shadow Flame Protocol. Subroutine. Transmutation of grief. Skill. Echo Debt. Convert emotional betrayal into magical contract. She raised her hand. Flames flickered across her fingertips. But this wasn't archive burn. This was something more personal. A gift of her own trauma. I won't kill you, she said to Minjae, But you will never lie again. The flames curled upward into a thin lattice of binding glyphs, wrapping around Minjae's wrists, then his throat, then his shadow. This is your sentence, she whispered. Your voice will now carry the pain you caused. Every time you speak a lie, it will burn. The magic settled like a crown of ash. Minjae fell to his knees, choking slightly. It's done, the codex announced in her mind. Spell registered. Oathfire. Permanent curse. Level binding. Target. Ryu Minjae. Ares lowered his hand. The rage didn't leave his eyes, but something softer surfaced beneath it. Yunha looked down at Minjae, who now wept silently. You don't get to forget what you did, she said. You carry it. She turned and walked back inside. Ares followed her, silent. Neither of them spoke until the elevator doors sealed shut behind them. Then he finally whispered, You didn't have to protect him. She shook her head. I didn't protect him. I punished him in a way death couldn't. And as the elevator descended into the depths of the tower, the codex pulsed. New spell slot available. Flame of Judgment pending unlock. Yunha didn't smile. She simply whispered to herself, No one burns me twice. The codex had been whispering for hours. No, for days. Ever since the binding of Minjae, its voice had shifted. It no longer just offered information or alerts. It pulsed like a living entity, a sentient flame coiled around Yunha's soul. She felt it when she blinked, when she breathed, when she dreamed. The whispers weren't random anymore. They were a countdown. Final tier initiation. Shadow Flame Codex. Status, 99.7%. She stood in the rooftop garden of the Lux Tower, the sky bruised with twilight, the wind sharp with winter's scent. The city below roared with electricity, unaware that one floor beneath its clouds, a contract older than civilization was about to be rewritten. Yunha stared at her palm. Her hand trembled, not from fear, but anticipation. A flame curled at her fingertips, silver at first, then gold, then deep red. The codex burned, through her skin like a crown being forged inside her bones. Ares appeared without sound, as he always did. His presence didn't announce itself. It enveloped the space. He said nothing at first, only stood beside her, watching the last trace of sun bleed behind Seoul's jagged skyline. It's time, isn't it? She asked. He nodded once. The codex chose you. It's completing the integration. She exhaled, her breath fogging in the cold air. What happens when it's done? You won't be just a user, he said. You'll become the archivist, keeper of the shadow flame. The codex will no longer be something you activate. It will be you. She turned to him. And the cost? Ares didn't answer immediately. Instead, he held out a small device, a silver ring embedded with ancient glyphs, a cipher looped in endless recursion. It pulsed faintly in his hand, resonating with the flame in hers. I know what you're sacrificing, he said finally. I know what it means to sever your human contract. She blinked. My what? He looked away. You've always wondered why I never left Seoul. Why I stayed buried behind glass and machines and rituals. Ares, I died, Yunha. The wind stopped. He turned back to her, eyes darker than the storm clouds overhead. 5 years ago, in the Battle of Jaok Mountain. The Shadow Court used a time curse on my soul core. It fractured. My body was rebuilt using chronolace, the most illegal form of magic in existence. I exist because I rewrote fate, and the Codex let me stay. She stared at him, heart pounding. You rewrote time? I bought it, he said. 5 years, just 5. I chose to live long enough to find the next bearer. The Codex predicted her, but I didn't know it would be you. Tears blurred her vision. You waited for me. I waited, he whispered, for the only person who could finish what I started. The Codex flared. Final confirmation, host acceptance required. Transformative contract rewrite. Initiation YN. Yunha didn't hesitate. She reached into her own flame, into the codex buried beneath her ribs, and said aloud, Yes. The world stopped. Literally. Time fractured for one heartbeat. The clouds froze. The wind paused mid-gust. Her hair hung in the air like strands caught in water. And then it began. Her soul unraveled. Not in pain, but in revelation. She saw her memories stretch before her like a tapestry. Her mother's voice, her father's hand on her head, the orphanage, the rejections, the broken interviews, the day she met Ares, the first time the Codex whispered, the duel, the betrayal, all of it, and then a flame devoured it, not to erase, but to rewrite, rebirth protocol engaged. Her body shimmered, not with light, but with knowledge. Spells she hadn't learned began to burn themselves into her blood. The archive burn expanded. It split into branches. One became Truth Rend, a spell that disassembles lies from the inside out. Another, Oath Weaver, capable of embedding contracts into spoken language. Her mind could now hold 1,000 threads of history at once. She could recall the entire floor plan of LX Corp from memory. She could hear whispers from dead mages etched into the ley line. And her name? It changed. The Codex whispered it. Title, Yunha Kang. Designation, High Archivist of the Shadow Flame. When time resumed, the wind hit her like a blessing. Ares was staring at her. Not like before. Now he knelt, not from submission, but reverence. You are no longer my secretary, he said softly. She smiled, fire licking at her shoulders like a living cloak. No, she whispered. I'm your equal. The wind carried the declaration. From beneath the tower something trembled. Deep beneath Seoul, where the ley line pulsed with ancient hunger, the Shadow Court stirred. Its members felt the shift. The Codex had awakened. The archivist had risen. And their time was up. Yunha reached down and lifted Ares to his feet. We fight together now, she said. Not as CEO and staff, not even as mage and spell. He nodded. We fight as those who remember the truth and refuse to let it be rewritten by fear. The Codex pulsed a final message. All tiers unlocked. Flame Sovereign system integration complete. The sky cracked in response. The war had begun, and the secretary was gone. In her place stood the flame that would burn history into legend. The summons arrived not in words, but in fire. At exactly midnight, the skies above Seoul cracked open with silent lightning. Every ley line connected device inside Eluk's tower flickered off for 7 seconds, just long enough for the world to feel the weight of something ancient opening its eyes. The message branded itself onto the black marble floor of the executive wing, seared in glowing glyphs no mortal could decipher. But Yunha could. The Codex translated instantly. By decree of the Third Flame Tribunal, the Shadow Court summons Ares G and Yunha Kong for violations of the Sevenfold Accord. Charges: temporal defiance, unauthorized Codex synchronization, soul binding without right. You will attend. You will answer. You will remember. Ares didn't speak for a full minute. He just stood there, staring at the smoldering glyphs, his jaw set tight, the old shadow in his eyes resurfacing like a scar aching through bone. Yunha watched him, her heartbeat louder than the wind. This isn't just a hearing, is it? He looked at her then, and in his silence, she found her answer. No, he said. It's an execution dressed as ceremony. They had broken laws that weren't recorded in books. These weren't corporate violations or mortal infractions. These were codes inscribed into the roots of the magical world itself, oaths written in flame and blood by the first mages to ever walk beneath the moon. And the court, the Shadow Court, was the keeper of those laws. They didn't govern, they remembered. They enforced balance not through power, but memory. Because in their dominion, the worst crime was not pain. It was forgetting. At dawn, the summons activated. A rift split open inside Ares' war room, revealing a gate built from compressed starlight and dying oaths. Its frame hummed with the remnants of every trial it had ever opened for. Ares and Yunha stood before it, dressed not in armor, but truth, no illusions, no glamours, nothing to hide behind. That was the price of entry. As they crossed the threshold, Yunha felt time twist around her. Her skin tingled, her heartbeat slowed, and then she was standing not in a courtroom, but a memory, a city, not soul, older, cracked with age, but untouched by time. The sky above was a deep violet, and 7 thrones of translucent obsidian loomed at the horizon, each one occupied by a figure that looked barely human, some cloaked in feathers, others in stone, one made entirely of smoke that never settled. These were the judges of the Shadow Court, immortal echoes of those who once defined the boundary between magic and mortality. You enter not as yourselves, one of them intoned, its voice neither male nor female, but as vessels of your own past. Your truth will defend you or destroy you. Ares stepped forward. We did what we had to. The codex was dying. The seals were breaking. Spare us justification, another judge hissed. Begin the trial of memory. Without warning, the ground beneath them fractured. And then she was 10 years old again. Yunha stood barefoot in the ashes of her old home on Jeju Island, the scent of burnt wood and blood in the air. Her parents were gone. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision. Figures from the blind moon cult, cloaked in gray and cruelty. One stepped forward, not to kill her, but to study her, to measure. You have the spark, he had said, reaching toward her face, half-formed, incomplete, but divine in origin. Yunha shook as the memory played out, not just for her, but for the entire court, because this wasn't recollection. It was evidence. You carry the blood of Yuhua, one of the judges said slowly. The sealed deity of lost knowledge, thought wiped from all records. Her lineage was purged during the Ascendant War. Yunha's lips parted. I didn't know. The judges leaned forward in unison. But the codex did. The air tightened like a fist. They turned to Ares, and you bound her knowing she was divine-blooded. You rewrote time to find her. You altered your own death. I delayed it, Ares growled. Not for power, for balance. Yet in doing so, another voice whispered from the shadows. You broke the accord. You manipulated fate. You merged her soul with the codex. You didn't protect the timeline. You redefined it. The chamber rippled. Ares doubled over, clutching his chest. Blood leaked from his mouth, not from injury, but from time itself trying to correct what it had once accepted. Stop it, Yunha cried. It wasn't his fault. The codex needed a bearer, and it chose me. A judge extended a hand. Then show us your truth. Open your flame. The codex answered before she could. It ignited, blazing across her body like scripture made of stars. Flames wrapped around her, not to destroy, but to reveal. Glyphs spun from her shoulders, displaying timelines she didn't remember living, futures that were aborted, paths that never came true, and at the center of it all, a glowing sigil pulsed behind her ribs. Yuhua descendant class. Detected. Knowledge-born rank. Absolute access granted. She fell to her knees. I'm not just a secretary, she whispered. I'm a fragment of something lost, but I never wanted this. A voice from above responded, softer than the others. And that is why you were chosen. Silence. Then, one by one, the judges rose. You are not guilty of theft, said the first. Nor of rebellion, said the second. You are guilty, said the third, of remembering what the world wanted to forget. But that, said the fourth, is why you must remain. The court shimmered. A pillar of light descended between Ares and Yunha. Your punishment is your responsibility, the first judge declared. You are now witnesses of the flame, archivist and shadowkeeper. You will protect the truth even if it breaks you. Ares stood barely. His voice cracked. And if we fail? Then the world forgets again, said the seventh, and this time no one will be left to remind it. The trial ended. They returned to Seoul just before midnight, the gate collapsing behind them. Neither spoke as they stepped into the elevator. Only when the doors closed did Yunha whisper, "I'm not human." Aries took her hand, trembling slightly. "Neither am I." She leaned into him, not for comfort, for resolve, because now they knew what they were, and the world would either remember them or burn trying to erase them again. The stars burned red the night the world remembered her name, not the name written on her ID badge, not the one whispered in hallways between spreadsheets and coffee orders, not the secretary, not even the codex bearer. No, what lit the sky that night, what made the ley line tremble beneath Seoul's ancient bones, was the name that hadn't been spoken in centuries, the name written in fire, the name carved into the last page of the forgotten archive. Keeper. Yuna stood on the fractured rooftop of Eluk's tower, wind howling, mana surging like a tidal wave about to consume the city. Below her, the skyline bled light and distortion. Buildings shimmered in and out of existence, flickering between timelines like dying memories. Some never built, some already lost. The codex pulsed against her chest, its pages open not on paper, but across the air itself, suspended in orbit like a divine spellbook too sacred for mortal hands. Before her stood the court's enforcer, a creature without skin, without face, woven from the very laws they had broken, a monstrous amalgamation of oath and judgment, cloaked in ever-shifting armor of black fire and dying languages. Its voice didn't echo in the air. It drilled into the soul. "You have defied the accord," it spoke. "You have rewritten time. You have merged mortal flesh with divine ink. This archive must be sealed. You will be unmade." Yunha's fingers curled into fists. Her shadow burned brighter than her body. Behind her, Aries stood, battered, one knee in the rubble, blood dripping down his arm. His mana field was cracked, his time-bound soul on the brink of collapse, and yet he looked at her not with fear, with faith. The codex sang in her bones. Final tier access, unlocked, the eternal rewrite available. Warning, execution of rewrite will sever all ties to previous identity. Proceed? Winds in. She exhaled slowly, feeling every memory within her, stretched thin like threads about to snap. Her childhood, her parents, her loneliness, her years of trying, failing, being overlooked, the smell of burnt coffee, the sound of Aries' pen tapping his desk, the warmth of being needed, even if only in silence. All of it had led to this moment. "I'm not just someone who carries memory," she whispered. "I am memory." She stepped forward. The enforcer raised its hand, summoning a blade of mirrored truth, a weapon that didn't slice flesh, but rewrote essence. She didn't flinch. Instead, she raised her own hand. The flame around her flared white, then gold, then void. Eternal rewrite initiated. The sky above Eluk's tower split open like a page torn from reality. Glyphs fell like rain. The codex exploded outward, its spectral pages scattering into the air, each one embedding itself into the city, into the people, into the forgotten corners of the world. Memories no one remembered came rushing back. Hidden betrayals, erased heroes, stolen truths. And at the center of it all stood Yunha, no longer a girl, no longer a secretary, no longer only herself. She had become the keeper of the archive, the living interface of memory, fate, and flame. The enforcer struck, but her body dissolved into script before it touched her. She became words. She became record. And when she reformed, she stood behind him. "Your judgment is incomplete," she said softly, pressing her palm against its spine. And with that, she rewrote him. The enforcer gasped, not audibly, but metaphysically. Its form flickered. Its oaths collapsed. The code it was built from unraveled like an outdated version. "Go back to the court," she said. "Tell them we don't forget anymore." And she burned him, not into ash, but into memory. The enforcer vanished, absorbed into the codex, stored forever in the vault of forgotten enemies. The sky cleared. The mana flow stabilized. Soul exhaled. She turned. Ares was on both knees now. Not from pain, from awe. He looked up at her not as a leader, not as a man who once ruled the magical underworld. He looked at her like a knight beholding the sword that would end the war. Unha Kang is gone, she said, voice deeper now, braided with centuries. But I remember her, and I remember you. He bowed his head. Then let me stay by your side, not as your boss, but as your bonded guardian. She touched his forehead with 2 fingers, and a circle of fire etched itself around his heart. Contract forged. Guardian of the Keeper. Terms: eternal, unbreakable. The flames dimmed. The city awoke. And from that night forward, the name secretary would never again mean someone small. It would mean someone who remembers, who burns for truth, who rewrites fate.